Alright, let's do this. Hi. You can call me Finn, Wow, doesn't really matter. I'm here to talk about My Hero Academia because I officially have brain rot. So really, whatever's fine. Arguably, My Hero Academia's world building is its best quality. It delivers exposition through its characters slowly when we need the information in an organic way. Its society is very believable because it parallels our own in many ways. My favorite way that they do this is through the villains. From the League to Gentle Criminal, My Hero Academia has perfected its world building and character development for its villains. So I'm going to talk about it by reviewing the biggest arc for the villains in the series. And because I really want to talk about this arc, it's my favorite so far, with the sports festival being a very close second. Because that arc is just like, it's perfect? I want to say perfect because it's really just awesome. But I am going to be focusing on the manga because as of, today is the 19th of August, My Villain Academia hasn't started in the anime yet. It's about to, literally, the next episode coming out is the start of My Villain Academia. And that's Saturday. Today is Thursday. I'm trying to get this out before that happens. So if you're seeing this Friday, then I did it. But if you're not, oh well, we're still focusing on the manga. I may have made a few complaints about the pacing of season 5, but I do like that they decided to move the commercial from where it was in the manga. I think that was a good decision. Putting the commercial and then the fight with Bakugo, Todoroki, and the carbonation guy, between that and the start of NVA was a weird choice. So I'm going to skip over that fight and treat the commercial and the start of NVA as one whole continuous line of events. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to call this arc My Villain Academia, or NVA for short. I know the official name for the arc is Meta Liberation Army arc, but that's a mouthful and it sucks, so I'm not going to call it that. The commercial is simple. We see a few people with mutant-type quirks, and we get a bit of history about support items for heroes, and then Redestro makes his announcement. The world of heroes can now expect something from his company as well. And the reason why I'm avoiding saying the company name is because I have no idea how to pronounce it, and I don't feel like looking it up. So, one thing that I want to point out that I find interesting about this commercial is when he puts his arms over his eyes, it looks like he has a mask over them, and it's almost a call out to his quirk. The way Redestro is introduced to us characterizes him instantly. He kills one of his employees for disagreeing with the Meta Liberation Army book, but he feels bad about it. He feels like he had to, but he didn't want to. We get more explanation on the MLA's ideology and history of quirks after this. We meet the other members of the MLA as well as Getten, and Redestro declares that they will take down the League of Villains. The MLA ideology in the past, especially around the time quirks were still developing, is great world building, but we'll get back to that later. For now, I want to talk about the excellent characterization of Redestro in this one scene. We are seamlessly introduced to what he does for a living. We know that his company is getting more powerful and rich because they're able to start branching out to heroes, and it smoothly moves into the Meta Liberation Army. It comes up as an accident from Redestro when it's clear to the readers after what happens that it was very intentional. The smile that Redestro puts on as Miyashita trashes the MLA book is clearly forced, thus keying us in that something is off. After Miyashita is finished, he breaks. He shows his stress, his disappointment, and slowly lets it out as he sort of brutally murders him. All because he didn't agree with the ideology. Redestro could have let him go. He could have let him live a normal life without ever bringing up the MLA to him again. He doesn't agree, so why bother? It doesn't matter in the long run because they'll be taking over the country soon anyway, but that isn't who Redestro is. He's a fanatic, so much so that he's willing to kill one of his best employees, which he declared himself was the case, all because he didn't agree. This isn't all at once. Redestro doesn't explode in anger. He tries to stay calm, happy, but he easily stresses, as he reveals later in this arc. He tries his best to hold it back, but he just can't. Not when it comes to Destro and the Meta Liberation Army. If that requires killing someone he was fond of, then so be it, even if it pains him to do so. Because nothing takes precedence over the Meta Liberation Army, but at the same time, it does show that he cares about other things. It shows a multifaceted personality, but in the end, the one thing he cares about the most is the Meta Liberation Army. He's a well-rounded cult leader, and this scene is honestly amazing for showing that off. We see a meeting between Redestro and the other leaders of the MLA, as well as Getten, and it's revealed that they have kidnapped Girin. They want to use him to get information about the League of Villains. And Girin oddly turns out to be a half-decent criminal. He says that he destroyed anything on paper about them and refuses to release anything that he knows. He says that good merchants don't sell out their customers. This right here is a great way to set up Twice's connection to him. Girin isn't just some random criminal that's going to sell out the League for his own sake. He actually has a bit of integrity, at least enough to not sell out his clients. We then get a glimpse of the League fighting Gigantomachia with some beautiful art, and we're into the thick of it. The next chapter starts with Shigaraki decaying the My Hero Academia logo, and I can't help but evil cackle in response. It's so good. This is the first time we see someone narrate the story besides Midoriya. We know My Hero Academia is Midoriya telling the story of how he became the greatest hero. We're told that at the very beginning, and to complement this, we're often given bits of narration in past tense. Midoriya has no way of knowing any of this since he has no involvement in this part of the story. Even in the Pro Hero arc, he has some involvement because he watches the fight on TV. Up until that point, there's no narration. The incident in Daika is edited to seem like there was no League of Villains involvement at all. Instead, it's Spinner who narrates, which is the perfect choice for the way this arc progresses. And we finally start getting more characterization for him, as well as a little more world building. We're introduced to the Creature Rejection Clan, and Spinner tells us a little bit about them. They're modern-day fossils and commit hate crimes against people with mutant-type quirks. He also tells us that heteromorph isn't a polite term, and he doesn't like to use it to describe himself. My Hero's society parallels our own in a lot of ways. It's easy to believe that in the beginning of quirks, a lot of people wouldn't accept the mutant types. Humans are terrible and predictable, and anything different from us we hate. Having heteromorph as not quite a slur, but not polite either, is a great add-on. It makes it that much more believable. It also leaves a lot up to your imagination. I can definitely see that word developing to become very offensive and turn into a slur as society goes on, much like certain words do for us. Anyway, the League of Villains slaughter them and begin searching for anything of value. We cut back to the League of Villains at the base. And Spinner asks how much longer they're going to be there. And really, I don't blame him. It's a rundown building, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. There's construction equipment around them, so maybe it was going to be a big house or a town, but it's been completely abandoned. I love the back and forth banter here, especially when Shigaraki chips in. And Mr. Compress just wants some sushi. Dabi comes in and complains that he's the only one looking for new recruits. Twice responds, well, you kill everyone you run into, so... Dabi's response is interesting because I have a little theory for him, and no, it's not the one you're thinking of. I am caught up with the current manga. He says, they were all just worthless. Trash, living day to day without any ambition. With a grin. I think Dabi used to feel this way for a few reasons. When we're introduced to him, Girin says he hasn't committed any notable crimes, but he has a passion for Stain. Which implies that after he died, he didn't do anything but mope around the streets, until he heard Stain's ideology and joined the League of Villains. I think it was Stain who motivated him to do something about his situation. Because who's more of a corrupt hero than his own father? Which was kind of true, I mean, come on. Before then, he had nothing. He had no conviction, no purpose. Which is why, even during the war arc, he brings up Stain, right before his reveal, too. Because while his main motivation is ruining Endeavor's name and killing him, that was what inspired him in the first place. But that isn't really relevant. I just wanted to share my thoughts since we haven't seen his side of the story quite yet. But let's get back to where we were. Shigaraki mentions it's been a month since Kurogiri was arrested. We get a flashback of Kurogiri saying that there's a power that he's going to go look for, and that he's doing it all for him. Shigaraki also says they've had no luck finding the doctor either. Toga says that he must miss Kurogiri because he was his babysitter, which we'll circle back to all of this in a moment. Shigaraki continues on about the doctor, and we get a few comments from the others before Spinner begins approaching him. Speech bubbles are warbled, showing that he's pissed. They round out as he starts explaining his life to him, and then exaggerated again as he brings up Stain. He grabs Shigaraki by the shirt, demanding to know what they're going to do. But before Shigaraki can respond, they're cut off. Spinner describes feeling hollow before Stain. Circling back again, it's very important that Spinner keeps bringing up Stain. He's just sitting around, waiting for the doctor to throw him a bone since Kurogiri has been arrested. He cares about Kurogiri. He didn't deny that he missed him, and Toga points that out herself. Spinner's loyalty is wavering. He doesn't see Stain here anymore, and it's been building up for a while. He wants to take action. He wants to go out and fight heroes. And yet, Shigaraki's sitting around doing nothing. Spinner is a passionate guy. He doesn't want to wait. Stain was the one who gave Shigaraki his motivation as well. He was the reason Shigaraki decided to go full force into killing All Might and dismantling Hero Society. With All Might retired, Shigaraki loses that purpose. It's almost like Endeavor. He achieved his goal in an indirect way, and it feels incomplete because of that. He stayed motivated throughout the Shueisha Saikai arc, because heroes are still a thing, but after Kurogiri was arrested, he crashed. They didn't even get paid in exposure. Hell, Twice and Toga ended up having to help the heroes. So, after Kurogiri is arrested, he loses his motivation. His main goal has been ripped away from him, and not only is All For One in jail now, but Kurogiri too. A visual way this is shown is by his hair. It's longer now, down to his shoulders, and much dirtier. He's truly lost all of his drive. And a side note, a little headcanon that I have is that Kurogiri was the one who cut his hair, which is another reason why it's gotten so long, and that might as well be canon because, like, come on. But anyway, on to the rumbling. Gigantomachia is here, and they immediately start to fight. He's distressed by how weak Shigaraki is. The doctor begins to communicate with them through the radio that Giga brought. I was never really sure what Gigantomachia was until I actually reread this arc for this video when I caught this. I wasn't sure if he was a human with a really unique quirk, some kind of Nomu, maybe a high-end, or something like Kurogiri with a couple quirks so he doesn't go completely brain dead. But I finally caught this line. The doctor says with his durable body, he could handle multiple quirks without needing to be remodeled first. So I'm guessing he had some sort of quirk that made his body stronger, but it's still kind of unclear. I really hope that we get more explanation about Gigantomachia and how exactly he was created and why he's so loyal to All For One, but we'll just have to wait and see for more story to come out. The doctor says that Gigantomachia is fiercely loyal to All For One, and that they're going to have to earn his loyalty. The doctor calms him down by using a recording of All For One's voice, and we get this great panel of Shigaraki saying, "We don't want this thing." The way Horikoshi draws the three of them in this shot is just like, they look so done. After a bit more conversation, the doctor warps them to his lab using Johnny. Rest in peace, Johnny, you were taken from us too soon. But if I got to choose how I go out, I think I would want Mirako to stomp my brains in as well. The full page shot of the high ends and the tubes is so eerie, I love it. It's like... sometimes Horikoshi can just draw something that makes me, like, I just stare at it. I sit there and I stare at it for very long. Most of the time, those are drawings of hawks, but we're not gonna talk about that right now. Now, I'm not really sure why they don't let us see the Doctor's face. It's pretty obvious that he's Midoriya's quirk doctor, and it's about to be revealed soon anyway who he is. But it's there, so... And I just have to say again, I love the League's banter. They're all so apathetic and sarcastic. It's so good. The Doctor ends up asking Shigaraki what exactly his goal is. And there's so much to unpack in Shigaraki's speech, so let's just jump right into it. Shigaraki describes feeling hollow before All For One found him and hugged him. And Spinner looks at him in shock. Just a chapter ago, we got Spinner describing feeling that same hollowness before seeing Stain on the news. Spinner's narration tells us that this was just another day, that him blowing up on Shigaraki is a regular occurrence, and this is emphasized by the rest of the group's bored reactions to this. Spinner had told Shigaraki, day after day, that he felt hollow. The expression on his face, as Shigaraki says he's felt the same way, says it all. There's a short flashback of the Doctor giving Shigaraki the hands, and it's unnerving. We get to see brief flashes of his family as he has this breakdown, but there aren't any details to it. Shigaraki tells the Doctor what his goal is now, and we get a shot of all the League's reactions to this. Toga is confused. Sure, she's frustrated with society and it holding her back from what she wants to do, but she doesn't understand that emptiness. Which, we will get back to that. Compress and Twice both look contempt, and while we don't know Compress's exact motivations yet, either that or I'm forgetting something from the war arc, we do know Twice's, and that's to have somewhere to belong. They don't understand that rage either. Spinner is really different. He's listening to Shigaraki carefully, his face is focused, but beyond that, there's nothing. He's taking in every word and letting it soak in. Dabi is another really interesting one, especially when you consider his backstory and motivations. He's expressionless, but looking away. And what do we know about Dabi now? He hates Endeavor. He's angry too. He's full of that rage. But he can't show that yet, so it's all shoved deep down into that ball of lead. Shigaraki says, even if Hero Society comes crashing down with a shot of All Might's pose in Kamino, even if I become the leader of the underworld with a shot of Overhaul, I'll still feel that emptiness. So why not destroy everything? This shows how Shigaraki's ideals are actually different from All For One's. He wants to destroy everything, while All For One wants to be the most evil. Like, don't even get me started on him, he's so lame. Anyway, we know where the story is heading by this point. Midoriya is going to save Shigaraki. He's going to show him that there is another way to help that feeling. Maybe he'll never completely get rid of that feeling, but there are ways to deal with it and cope. To make it a little easier. Ways that this arc has almost shown him. I just think he needs a little help. And then finally, Spinner's face at the end. So cute. I love you, Simba. I'm gonna show you at the end of the video because you're so precious. He's shocked. Shigaraki was hiding this. Behind him, we get to see what he's thinking about. The moment right before Giga arrives to rock their shit. He was yelling at Shigaraki, and it seemed like Shigaraki was about to respond. This was what he was going to say, even without the Doctor prompting him. He was going to say it today. Then, of course, we get Toga asking if she'll be able to keep the things she loves, and Shigaraki says that his allies' wishes will be spared, and this just further proves that Shigaraki's gonna be won over by the power of friendship. Dabi is such a jerk, I love him. Dabi knows he can't fight Giga. His endurance is shit and his flames did nothing to him. Which Toga points out because she's a little shit and will not hesitate. He calls her a lunatic and tells her to shut up, and says he's found a potential ally and that he'll be working on that instead. Dabi then says he's not going to go down with him in a blaze of glory, and that he's looking out for himself. Shigaraki's like, alright then, bring this ally. Said ally is, of course, Hawks, who ends up being the indirect cause of the PLF falling apart, Compress getting arrested, Shigaraki's body getting taken over by All for One, Toga going MIA, and the direct cause of Twice's death. And Dabi knew the entire time he was bullshitting. I love that Dabi doesn't give a single damn about the League, and that he so obviously states this and proceeds to mess everything up for his own desires. They get teleported back, and it's on to fighting Giga. A month and a half passes, and Spinner informs us that Shigaraki has been getting barely any sleep because of Gigantomachia's attack pattern. But despite being pushed on 3 hours of sleep for every 2 days, he smiles the entire time. Almost like a certain hero we know. Spinner's loyalty is still wavering. He says to Toga that she's still here despite there being no traces of Stain left. Toga, our bisexual icon, states that she loves Stain, Izuku, and Ochako too. Side note, she uses their first names, which adds to the creepiness of the character because she thinks that they're close enough that they can be on a first name basis. Spinner says it must be nice to be so free as he puts his Stain mask back on. These thoughts are still weighing on him. He still wants to follow his ideology. He hasn't been completely won over yet. His eyes. It's like a boy chasing after his dreams. Spinner, you are gay. I'm once again saying how much I love the League's banter. This preceding scene with Redestro has so many moments that make me chuckle every time. Twice says that Giran's been looking out for him ever since he joined the League. Which means they didn't just stop communicating. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me love the League of Villains so much. These little things that show how human they are, despite being the antagonists. Horikoshi could have just made them evil and left it at that. And at first, he kinda did. But then he started throwing in these little things that showed they're just people. Yeah, absolutely terrible people with low moral standards, but people. And then, Twice being Twice, he immediately insults Giran upon bringing his phone up to his ear. But it's not Giran on the other end, it's Redestro. Redestro explains the situation and makes a threat. If they don't come fight them, they'll hurt Giran. And they also know their location, so they can have top heroes sent to them at any moment. The League debates on whether or not they should go, but Shigaraki already knows his answer. He gets Twice to stop freaking out by taking off his mask, which, rude Shigaraki, come on. Calls the doctor to make sure he heard everything, and then says they're going. Spinner is quick to yell at Shigaraki, but after he explains his plan, he seems surprised. He wonders, are we really going? But Shigaraki is confident that they will be able to fight anyone who attacks them. The doctor teleports them right outside Daika. After a little banter, they're approached by a hero. They get ready to attack, but it's only Slide and Go, coming to escort them down to Daika. The Spinner is surprised to see him there, and says that he doesn't recognize this hero, which implies that he knows a lot of them? I really wish we could know the context for this, whether he used to be a hero fanatic or it was research done for Stain. Either way, I want to know the context behind this, and I hope we get to see it one day. They're immediately attacked by townsfolk, commanded by Curious and Hanabata. In a morbid way, I suppose, I love that Shigaraki instantly starts using this quirk to dust people. When you think about it, we really haven't seen Shigaraki use his quirk that much, and we've only seen him kill one person with it, so finally getting to see it in action again is kind of exciting. Redestro says without the Nomus, the League of Villains is basically nothing, and he has a point. I mean, look at where they just were without All for One, the Doctor, or Kurogiri, a literal Nomu. Now we get Toga's fight with Curious, which she almost dies in, and considering this is manga and she just got a backstory dump, it's really surprising that she didn't die. You escaped the anime tropes today, Toga. Toga's backstory brings up the concept of one's quirk correlating to their personality. I definitely think her quirk is wrapped up in her mental health too, hence why she not only killed the bird, but bit it too. And then, of course, the whole suppressing aspect and society sweeping these kind of things under the rug. I think Toga's backstory is easy to look over at a first glance, because it's just kind of the simple, oh, the crazy one was born like that kind of story, but there's a lot to it as well. We also get to see more of the MLA ideology. Curious describes Toga as a victim of current society and how they suppress quirks, or as they call them, meta abilities. So far, their ideology doesn't seem too crazy. Their main goal appears to be to let people use their quirks whenever they want, however they want. Of course, this would definitely cause some level of chaos with no rules or regulations, but if you're as obsessed with My Hero as I am, you know in America, people can use their quirks as freely as they want, so could it really be that bad? Of course, they treat using your quirk in public in Japan like jaywalking, so it still leaves you wanting to know more. And finally, we get to see Uraraka's quirk used in a gruesome fashion. Someone whose quirk we've been told is perfect for rescue, the quirk of a girl who's bubbly and kind, used to murder in a brutal way. I love the line where she says she's just like Izuku now that she's all beat up. She wants to become the people she loves, right? And also the real him, because he gets injured a lot. And then she says that they have to destroy whatever they hate, right, Tomura? And again, we'll get back to that. We get a little more characterization of Ridestro with him crying over Curious's death, which, rest in peace, you were one of the one of the good ones. And we also get to see Skeptic blowing up on Giran simply for saying footage. But even after all the nagging, he explains anyway, which Giran also points out. Giran calls them insane for thinking that things will change, and Ridestro says it's everyone else that's gone mad. Without motivation, people will not be moved, with the speech bubble imposed over Shigaraki. Shigaraki needs new conviction. After all, we've already discussed it, and now we have our confirmation. We're back to following the League, minus Toga, just in time for Trumpet to show up, which, I'm sorry, his codename is Trumpet and he's a politician. I can't. He uses his quirk to send a huge horde of Daika citizens at them, and Shigaraki is so tired that he begins to have flashbacks. Shigaraki feels so sick and frustrated that he can't remember it all, that he throws up. He even unlocks the next level of his quirk and dusts all of those people rushing at them without even having to touch them all. Spinner reacts shocked. Shigaraki, he's speechless and gay. Dabi said ice, and the entire fandom lost their minds. I still think about this all the time, and all the wild theories on who Ketten could be, when he turned out to just be some dude. Some people really thought they were going to be Rei, which, are y'all okay? Are y'all alright? What even was that? I love Dabi so much that I spent, an entire minute trying to analyze that ice page. Although I'm pretty sure this is the first time we get an internal monologue from him. He's surprised that he didn't notice Getten, despite them clearly being somewhat powerful. Getten asks Dabi why he isn't immediately using his quirk, wondering aloud if maybe he has a problem with his meta ability, to which Dabi responds snarkily, "Ice melts," and lets out a huge blast of fire. I freaking love this a-hole! But I do actually have a lot to say about their fight. It's packed with a lot of little things for Dabi's character. And Getten's, too. So, obviously, we have Dabi fighting someone who can manipulate ice. That one's obvious and I don't need to get into it. But there's so much more to it. Getten makes this battle so personal for Dabi and what he says. And yet, Dabi still lets nothing slip. Getten definitely gives me Inosuke vibes. Stupid, an absolute dumbass, but very pretty and very strong. Getten even says it himself. He's trained way more than any hero has, so no school. He's spent all of his time training his quirk, so he's so powerful despite being so young. Dabi, well, he does have that C in intelligence, but he's very perceptive. The doctor pointed this out twice just a few chapters ago, and now we know Dabi didn't believe Hawks at all. So while he's not smart per se, he is observant. Dabi left home when he was 13, still in middle school. Before then, he spent all of his time training his quirk, desperate to get his father's approval. There's similarities here to Getten, with the key difference being who got that approval. Next, Dobby's expressions throughout the battle. Dobby is pretty apathetic most of the time, only making mildly irritated faces every now and then, with two big exceptions. His family, and when he's fighting. Whether it's a hero or a villain, he's always grinning. He makes wild, feral smiles, and he's way more talkative than usual, with the talking, of course, being to stall between blasts. What's interesting about this battle is that as it drags on, his attitude drastically changes. He's using his quirk way too much, seriously burning himself, and it hurts. Whether his apathetic personality is who he really is or just a ruse to help keep his secret, we'll have to wait and see more of the manga. I'm really curious, to see if he's going to show that he's completely off the rails, or if he's still going to have that standoffish personality. Also, I want to point out really quick that Dobby says he's gotten stronger, and right after he says that, he lets out a huge blast that's almost similar to Shoto's giant ice glacier. The fight is scattered throughout the arc, so I'll talk about it more as we go along, but for now, it's time to be sad over Twice, and oh boy, can I get sad over Twice. Twice has gone off to look for Toga, and we get to see the moment that he finds her. She's severely injured and hidden in a shed. He instantly starts freaking out. The second voice that always pops out is stronger than it's ever been before. The speech bubbles are shaded darkly and all the words are bolded. Twice is trying to be hopeful. He's begging for Toga to still be alive, but the second voice keeps butting in over and over. It keeps contradicting him and he tells it to shut up out of frustration. And he pulls out the handkerchief. God, this freaking handkerchief. The second voice tells him, "Give it up. The girl's dead." His speech bubbles get wobbly as he begins to cry. He says she gave the entire league a place to belong. No, him a place to belong. She gave him a place to belong. Twice vows to kill the people who did this to her as a group approaches him. This group are replicas of Twice made by Skeptic's quirk. You can see Twice's mouth wide open through his mask as he reacts in horror to them. It's chilling. Of course, he immediately starts getting flashbacks, and we're on to the next chapter. All it takes is one bad day. The subtitle and theme of this volume. The replicas aren't after Twice, though. They're after Toga, and once again we're told that Twice's quirk is too powerful and another villain organization wants him. I really don't understand why they thought killing Toga right in front of him was a good recruiting tactic, especially since they've apparently done so much research on the League, but I guess they were planning on some kind of brainwash? I don't know, it seems a little stupid of them. The Twice replicas are about to snap Toga's neck by twisting her head, once again showing that Horikoshi is not going to hold his punches for this arc. It's pretty hard to look at, honestly. Twice is having a full mental breakdown, his trauma being ripped right to the surface by watching himself kill Toga. And he blabbers that over and over again, but he's helpless as he's pinned to the ground by more replicas of himself. We've already seen a little bit of his story right before the Shueisha arc of how he became so traumatized, but now we get the full picture, and it's pretty sad. We start by learning that he doesn't have a family. His parents are dead. He just hit someone with his motorcycle. Despite obeying the speed limit, doing the right thing, he's the one implicated. He now has a permanent stain on his record at only 16. He says they couldn't have known, and neither did I, just how far someone could fall from something so small. He's fired because, as it turns out, the guy he hit is one of their main client's son, and they're threatening to pull out of all deals. We then learn that his parents were killed in a villain attack when he was still in middle school. He's been alone for a while, but he's doing good for himself. He had a job and a vehicle, and he was trying to do the right thing. But with these kind of situations, it's a slippery slope. Things like this often happen to people in real life. One bad thing can send your life crashing down in many different kinds of ways. Twice was desperate to talk to someone. He needed someone he could trust. He needed comfort, but he had nothing left. This doesn't excuse the crimes he's committed, obviously, but it does give us perspective into his character. And it makes you feel bad for him, even if it's only a little bit. Then we're after the part where his clones all kill each other. He's talking to Gihren. Twice explains this situation to him and tells him about his quirk. Gihren says it's sad that a guy like him ended up like this. And Twice responds with, "What's a guy with nothing left supposed to do? Find other people who can trust him." He offers him a cigarette and he takes it. From what Gihren says next, we can infer that this conversation was intended for him to recruit him into the League. He tells him there's a gang that's looking for people that could use him. He says, "Don't worry, there are plenty of others like you. More than you think." And he's right. Without getting too personal, because oversharing on the internet is bad for my mental health, Twice is a character that really means a lot to me. I can relate to him in a certain way. In this scene, Gihren connects Twice back to his longing for companionship. With just a few simple words, Twice is brought back to who he was before everything truly went downhill. He's been broken again, and now he wants the same thing again. Friendship. All he needed was someone to remind him of that, which is why he loves Gihren so much. Gihren was the one who brought him back. Gihren was the one who led him to what he so desperately wanted. And I get that. That need to have a friend so badly you would do anything just to talk. Desperately needing to talk to someone. I've been there countless times. And all I've ever really wanted in life was friends. It took me a while to realize this. Nearly all 20 years of this short life. That all I really want is friends who love me and that I love back. I just get Twice. You can't just give a character my meaning of life and then expect me not to love them. Anyway, enough of that before I start dumping all my issues onto the internet. Twice realizes he's the real one after the replicas break his arms, he makes an Aston clones, and saves Toga, yay! But we also get to know just how much Twice cares about the League with a few little lines. He said he won't watch a friend die. He says he wants to repay the League for everything they've done to him, and that's been on his mind this whole time. And I just loved the line, until I fell right in with them. With her. What Gihren alluded to was shown to us. Twice's army, the Sad Man's Parade, begins to flood the streets completely. And Twice feels like he can finally repay them. The skeptic is pissed and on his way down, clearly intending to win in the end, because he said he's only ever lost once. The clamor of the army of Twices is so good. It's one part that I can't wait to see animated with all the voices blended together. It's gonna be awesome. My favorite is when Compress asked if he got over his trauma. Twice says he did with the power of love and friendship. Compress says this seems more like a hero origin story, and the Twices explain that it's because he cares about them so much. Also, they get so excited to clone Dobby because he's better in a fight than him, and he's a prodigy, and Twice, you want to talk about trauma? And Dobby still barely reacts. Man. Kitten does end up finding out that Dobby's quirk burns him. It's actually how we're officially told this information. Looks like someone else is observant too. In the arc right before this one, we found out that Toya actually had a stronger fire quirk than Endeavor's, but Ray's weak constitution or her ice resistance. Us crazy Dobby as Toya theorists had already figured this out before this confirmation, from the way Dobby's arms would always sizzle and smoke after every attack, but I still think it's interesting that these two bits of information were given to us in adjacent arcs. The part about us figuring it out before it was confirmed isn't necessary to the analysis. I just wanted to flex. I mean, what else am I supposed to do with all the time I spent on it? I had to take my jacket off. I was sweating. It's so hot right now. Dobby's grin and anger after getting spelled off about how there should be a hierarchy of quirks based on how powerful they are. And then Dobby, sounds miserable. I'm gonna need you to die. Ooh, Dobby is he's just getting hit with all these things over and over and over again. So yeah, other than that, probably hitting Dobby like a freight train, this is where we get to see how fucked up the MLA's ideology actually is. They don't want this supposed quirk freedom, they want a hierarchy based on quirks. It's not just the violence that puts people off. Now we're on to the stuff the anime decided to mess up. Hux's wings in the manga always look so good and detailed, but half-baked in the anime. And we'll never get to know the color of the paisley jacket. Such a shame. And it's really disappointing too, because anime-onlys will never get to know the reason why Dobby left Hux on red was because he was getting his ass beat in Daika by an ice quirk user. Anyway, Hux. There are little bits of his character speckled throughout this scene. When he messes with his fans, the paisley jacket, and when he speaks in his dialect at the very end. Now, I can't speak Japanese, I only read My Hero through English translations, so this is all coming from fans who can speak both. But Hux does speak in a different dialect sometimes. Shows that despite dropping his birth name, pushing his past behind him, potential training from the Hero Commission to work that dialect out of him, it still comes back. Our past makes us who we are, and we can't just shove it away. It's a theme that comes up later in Hux's character. The paisley jacket. I really wish we could have known what his actual color was for more analysis, but the middle of season 5 sucks anyway, so... This shows a subtle part of Hux's character that isn't too important in the long run, but I like anyway because I love Hux. He's actually my favorite character, which I know sounds weird considering the Twice rant I just went on, but that's for a later date. Anyway, Hux likes fashion. I know, riveting. But he does, from the back of volume 20, where he seems to be modeling, to the nice outfit he wears while walking to the train station with Endeavor, to the holographic one he wears in the book for the third movie. My boy likes fashion. Trust me, this is all important, I'm getting there. Finally, we have Hux messing with his fans in a classic Hux way. And a quick side note, I love how they show several girls on the street, well, fangirling, and then a middle-aged guy with a sweat drop. We instantly get an understanding of Hux's fan demographic, and it makes sense. It also parallels real life, something that My Hero often does that I think is really cool. The conclusion of all of this? Despite Hux being the next Lady Nagant, despite him being the next assassin for the Hero Commission, he is not like her. He is holding on to himself. He has that optimism we later see. Even with Best Jeanist, he got a decoy instead of killing him. He wants to be a hero like Endeavor. That's always been his goal. And all of these little actions show that and set up his character for the post-war arc. But this is supposed to be about the League of Villains. Sorry, I just really love Hux, so I wanted to take my opportunity to talk about him. Moving on. Shigaraki and Spinner are making their way to the tower, and Shigaraki looks absolutely exhausted. They're getting close, but there's still an entire horde of Daika citizens. It's not looking good for them. Luckily, though, the Sadman's parade is here. Shigaraki tells the Twices that getting the leader is now their top priority. And then the classic, you're going to regret toying with a guy's emotions. Shigaraki learns the power of friendship, the arc. Trumpet shows up. Spinner says he forgot about him, and I can't help but laugh because so do I, every time. He gets more people to charge at them using his quirk, and Spinner knows what he has to do to help Shigaraki. The scene inside the tower. Twice says several things that always make me smile. Then he clones the whole league and all their reactions, plus the Twice clones and what they do to them. He does a fast chop motion on Shigaraki's back. Dobby he literally bro hugs from behind, who only seems mildly annoyed by it. For Compress, he grabs his shin and tilts his head forward. All of the Twice clones get their own reaction panels as well as the league clones when Redustro activates his quirk, and this scene is just too good. Redustro tells Shigaraki the story about how the term quirk came around and that Destro's mother was that person. She was killed by a mob of anti-quirk people, and her words were used to enact laws to help stabilize society afterwards. But Destro hated these laws. He thought they went directly against what his mother wanted, to use quirks freely. So we get a history lesson mixed with MLA ideology, and both of these are mixed together perfectly and given to us very well. He tells Shigaraki well-known history, assuming that he doesn't know because he didn't receive a formal education. Shigaraki gets irritated and asks if he's mocking him. Redestro also takes the opportunity, while throwing the clone around, to tell him about Destro's origin. It's a smooth way to add in world building and know our foe's current motivations, especially when it's the type of history that's well known by everyone in society. There's a cliffhanger of Shigaraki about to fight Redestro as we're cut back to what Twice is doing. There's not much to say here, so we're going to move on to the next scene, which is what Spinner is up to. But I gotta do something to lighten Shigaraki's load. I gotta! Spinner, you are! Spinner's quirk lets him stick to walls, and Trumpet points out that it's a weak quirk. Again, with the quirks deciding your worth. It's pretty messed up and kind of contradictory to their beliefs if you think about it. Where's the freedom in being put in a box for what you're born with? But in a way, this also gives the MLA ideology a bit of roundness. It fluffs it up a little bit, because ideologies like this are also often flawed, like anything is, so it gives it that extra bit of realness. Spinner's response to him is perfect. He already knows what it's like to be looked at with hate. He knows what it feels like for people to judge him based on outward appearances. In fact, it barely bothers him. What gets him riled up is thinking about Shigaraki. He feels as if he's jumping on the Stain bandwagon, following it wherever it leads. But it made him feel passionate, and now Shigaraki is making him feel that way. The suspicion that Spinner might leave the League begins to melt away as he screams his thoughts at Trumpet. If he's passionate about it, then does it even matter? Why are all the villains way more relatable than the good guys? Anyway, back to Shigaraki. He looks terrible and is about to pass out on his feet. He's wobbling, mocking Redestro about how he thought they were going to be weaklings that they could easily take out, but look how far they've gotten. He attacks, his quirk still affecting things that he doesn't even touch, and Redestro responds that he's angry. He says that he's the type to let his rage build up, which is an important line for later, and he destroys one of Shigaraki's fake hands and one of his real ones. This, plus Redestro questioning his motivations, makes memories flood back to Shigaraki. First, of his sister, and then his mother. Redestro realizes that Shigaraki has activated his quirk on him a little bit. He was either told wrong info, or his quirk is evolving. It's a new concept explained quickly. If the right conditions are met, a quirk can change on the spot. He also mentions how quickly Shigaraki can move, which we've seen before, but he hasn't. He says that this can only be achieved by brutal training, which is more than likely what All for One put him through. Redestro goes all out after he admits that he misjudged him, and that he shouldn't have ranked him below him. Another call out to that lovely MLA belief. Shigaraki begins to remember his grandparents next. This is where we get our first "what I needed them to tell me was." Skeptic informs Redestro that something huge is on the way. Giga is here, which I forgot to mention because I got really excited to talk about Hawks. Shigaraki has completely remembered his past, and it's time for the full flashback. Honestly, there isn't much to say here that I haven't already said for Twice. It's sad. It's incredibly sad. You feel bad for him. Really, how could you not? He was a child. He didn't ask for any of this. He didn't know what he was doing. All for One comes to pick him up, and instead of helping him, he makes him worse. He puts that constant reminder of his trauma on him. He manipulates him. Like, again, this doesn't excuse the stuff he's done, obviously, but it makes you feel bad for him. The message of all it takes is one bad day is back. Also, it's really well done. Even when you first read it, you know what's going to happen. Shigaraki is going to accidentally kill his family. But it still hits you right to the core, because of the way it's written. Older Shigaraki's sparse narrating over it gives it a grim atmosphere. You feel bad for Tenko, not only because he cries so much, but he can't stop itching, which afterwards we find out is caused by being in that house with his father. And then there's the small bits of hope that heroes bring. At the beginning, when he plays heroes with the kids no one else wanted to play with, despite knowing he could get in trouble. seeing his grandma was a hero, and Hana saying they could become a hero duo in the future. It's the build-up that makes the conclusion so good despite knowing what's going to happen, and simply put, that's just good writing. There's a parallel in here to Shigaraki's explanation to the doctor. He says that if only someone had helped him, if anyone had helped him back then. This doesn't mention All for One at all, so I don't think he's included in this. I think he's thinking, if anyone else had reached out to help me, I might have ended up good. In the parallel, since no one did, why not destroy everything? He thinks multiple times throughout the backstory dump. What I needed to hear was about his family minus his dad. This is an obvious parallel to when Deku needed to hear the same thing from his mother. You can be a hero. The one who eventually heard this was Midoriya from All Might, while Shigaraki was guided down a different path. We have a little parallel to Ridestro in this scene too. Shigaraki says, before the one bad day, that all of his rage had built up. And just before we get his backstory, we get Ridestro telling Shigaraki, I'm the type to let my rage build up. Shigaraki's ability to use the full potential of his quirk hinges on his emotional state. While it's not directly affected by his emotions like Ridestro's is, it's still in relationship with them. And I still can't believe All for One gave him his name. I hate that bastard. Shigaraki finally answers Ridestro. The future, unnecessary. Whatever lies ahead, I just want them to live how they see fit. This is a real line. He actually says this. You know, I wouldn't be this attached to the villains if they weren't a found family, like my favorite trope of all time, but here we are. The tension right after this is really hard to describe. Honestly, you just have to read it to feel it. Giga is rushing towards Shigaraki, not even fazed by the Daika citizens attacking him, and the rest of the league quickly realizes this. Compress tries to warn them that he's unstoppable and they need to get to Shigaraki now. Shigaraki's hair goes solid white and he deliberately destroys all of the hands with it. Shigaraki lets out a huge blast of his quirk. Emerging from the smoke, clothes tattered, grinning. Spinner's narration coming back after all that intensity is so unintentionally or intentionally funny. Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. As everyone rushes to either help Ridestro or Shigaraki, Shigaraki fully releases his quirk, creating a huge crater that destroys everything in its wake. Gigantomachia watches. Ridestro's legs get caught in the blast, he chops them off so he can survive, and it's over. Trumpet tries to use his quirk to get the citizens to attack Shigaraki, but his pure aura stops him. Kinda reminds me of a certain someone. And what's the first thing Shigaraki thinks of after getting an entire army handed over to him? Compress wanting sushi. So he asks if he has any money on him. I kept thinking about this as this arc was coming out, so when it actually happened, when that was Shigaraki's first thought, I burst into tears. I was going through a really hard time when this arc was airing, so when that happened, it just kind of broke me. It made me sick, but it made me so happy that it all just came pouring out. Remember when I said we would get back to Toga? Well, here we are now. Back when Shigaraki was describing what he was going to do to the doctor, I mentioned that Toga seemed confused. She even had a little question mark by her. Toga's story in NBA nearly directly parallels Shigaraki's. She fights an MLA leader, gets beaten up, has a flashback, goes through a sudden quirk evolution, and then wins the MLA leader over. This is exactly how you could describe Shigaraki's fight as well, so it makes sense when at the end of Toga's she says we should destroy the things we hate, thus putting them on the same page from his speech. She may not get that rage, but she understands the desire to live freely and to destroy the things she hates. Shigaraki and Toga's goal ends up being the same after this arc, so in the end, I think Shigaraki's speech did motivate her. Next, I want to talk about Spinner's overall role in this arc, as well as his one as the narrator. In a way, we're supposed to be Spinner. Shigaraki takes the role of protagonist in this arc. We want Shigaraki to win, despite him being the main villain, because he is the main character of this arc. And he's the villain we followed for the entire story. But in the end, he's still the villain. He needs to win us over. Just like he needs to win Spinner's loyalty back. It wavers throughout this entire arc, up until the end when he declares his passion. Spinner, and us, want to see Shigaraki succeed because we've been following him this entire time. But at the same time, we have doubt. Now for us, it's because we don't want him to get stronger so he doesn't mess everything up for the heroes, and for Spinner it's because of Stain, but you get my point. Spinner, you! Lastly, the Meta Liberation Army. There's just something about the way they're written that makes them so much fun to watch. Redestro's strange but goofy personality that's expertly shown to us in his introduction. The other MLA members' weird quirks, no pun intended. The mystery around Getten, and their ideology slowly dropped throughout the arc. We could have gotten one big exposition dump in the beginning, but that would have been the easy way out. Instead, we start out by knowing the basics. They want quirks to be used freely. It doesn't seem too bad at first. We get this reiterated to us through Curious, who uses Toga as an example. She draws an in-world parallel between her and the problems with society, and how they can fix that with their ideals, showing us that their concerns are not unfounded. But then we get to see more of their solution through Getten. He shows us just how much of a fanatic he is, just like the last members, and we also get another real-life example to go along with their ideals. Dobby's quirk burns him whenever he uses it, so in the hierarchy of quirks, he would be ranked low. Getten also says some pretty nasty things to him because of it. It immediately puts us off. How's that fair at all? You don't decide what quirk you're born with, and Dobby certainly didn't want this one. Finally, our history lesson with Redestro and the Shigaraki clone. He tells us a piece of history that's common knowledge to the people, but not to us. It's done in a smooth way as well, because he assumes Shigaraki doesn't know because he doesn't have a formal education. We thus learn an interesting piece of history, and it's told to us in a way that doesn't break our immersion. With it, Redestro gives us a piece of hidden history, while slipping in MLA ideology as well. My Hero Academia's biggest strength is its world building. I love that it's done slowly. Information is given to us as we need it, not in large dumps that rip us out of the story. We learn a lot about heroes in the beginning because Midori is a hero fanatic. Everything he says would make sense for him to say, since he constantly thinks about it and his mumbling habit comes up many times throughout the story, even when it's not for the sake of giving us new information. Where I think this really shines though is through the villains. Stain is still having ripple effects on the story to this day. He was a huge factor of getting society to the point where it is in the manga today. Even Overhaul gave us a bit of world building. We learned a lot about the nature of quirks through him and Eri, as well as a bit of history. It's the same with My Villain Academia. The most interesting parts of this world, in my opinion, are the darker parts. It's the people who slip through the cracks. How are there still villains if there's an oversaturation of heroes? There's something wrong with society, and I just adore how it's slowly brought up through the villains. Mostly, anyway. We see other cracks in the system through heroes themselves, but I think it's much more interesting to have this information leaked to us through the people it actually affects. This is how you world build. You don't give long exposition dumps that make your readers zone out halfway through. Show, don't tell. And My Hero Academia does that slowly, giving us bits of information to the characters as we need it. So yeah, that's My Villain Academia, and the wonderful world building through villain. It's my favorite and one of the best arcs in My Hero. It's right up there with the sports festival in terms of action, pacing, and tension, and I can't wait to see it all animated. Of course, considering nothing is cut off or done badly, which, considering how season 5 has gone so far, I'm trying not to get my hopes up anymore. But anyway, thanks for watching. I've been wanting to make video essays for years now, but I've been too nervous to do it. Even just sitting down to film this, I was so nervous at first, and you probably noticed how I got more confident as I got further along. I think my worries about season 5 and my excitement for this arc are what finally pushed me over the edge, though. I really wanted to talk about it. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Was that yummy?